We have found the audio clips we want to put into our game, and we see them here inside my audio folder inside of Assets. The goal is to get the nature sound to play in the background. One way to do this would be to drag it onto another object up here in the hierarchy, or open the object, and in the inspector I could drag it into there. And that's okay if you want to attach an audio source to a pre-existing object. But I don't really want this nature sound attached to any of those objects, so I think I'm just going to drag it directly into the hierarchy. So is that an audio source? No, it's not. If I look in the inspector window, I see that we have another game object called nature. So when you drag an audio into the hierarchy, it creates a game object, and that game object has an audio source component attached to it. Notice the play on awake property is checked. So if we play it now, we should be able to hear the audio immediately. Nice. That's how easy it is to add some ambiance to your scene. Escape and stop. What we also want to be able to do though is add audio to particular objects so that the sound will be louder when you are close to those objects. I'm going to go to the asset store and search for Dancing Rabbit. I see what I'm looking for. It's a low poly dancing rabbit. I've used this one before. I like it. I'm going to click on download. We have this little warning about it being created for Unity 4 and it may have issues with working with Unity 5. So I'm going to try it out anyway. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to accept. And then I need to click import. I'll just import everything here. And now I see in my assets folder the WR White Rabbit folder. I'm going to go back to the scene view. And into that folder, let's look in the graph library folder, the model, merged, characters, cartoon, rabbit. So it's a lot of folders, but we finally find our little rabbit prefab. I'm going to drag that into my scene. Just rotate it, lift him up a little bit, and scale him down a little bit. I also want to change his name in the hierarchy so it's not so long. I'll just name him Rabbit. Let's see how big he is when I run this. There he is right there, and notice he's got an animation on him. He's already dancing. I'm going to stop this. So what we want now is to have some music coming from him. Let's go back to the assets folder inside of audio and use this Latin dance clip. And this time I'm not going to drag it directly to the hierarchy. I want to drag it onto the rabbit. I'll select the rabbit in the hierarchy so I can see his components in the inspector and drag Latin dance over into that spot. This also says play on awake. So now if I were to run the game, I should hear two audio tracks running. Good. However, I do not want to hear the Latin music until I'm closer to the rabbit. And then as I get closer and closer to the rabbit, I would like it to get louder. We can do that under the 3D sound settings. I'm going to click on this drop down to expand it. And let's try a min distance of 1 with a max distance of about 50. It has a logarithmic roll-off, which you can see a graph of that there, meaning when I'm 50 meters away, it's going to be almost to 0. And then as I get closer, it just gradually goes up in volume. When I get to about 10 meters away, it gets up to about this volume level. But then it starts going up really quickly. So in 5 meters, I'm almost at 100% volume. At 1 meter, I finally reach 100%. Let's hear how this sounds if I press run. Notice that graph is still showing. And I can see myself get further and closer to the rabbit. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like it's getting louder or quieter as I get closer or further from the rabbit. Also, it didn't loop, it didn't repeat, which might be a problem. So I'm going to press escape and stop the game. So the reason it's not repeating after the first time through the sound is because we don't have the loop checkbox checked. I do want to check that one. And also for the nature clip, maybe we didn't let it play long enough, that should also loop. I'm going to go over to the nature clip and make sure that's set to loop as well. Okay, let's go back to the rabbit now. And the other issue was the 3D sound didn't seem to be working. That is because on Spatial Blend, you have to remember to move it from 2D to 3D. It's not good enough just to set up those 3D sound settings. You have to tell it it's got a 3D blend. I'm going to move that all the way over to 1. Let's run it again. So now you can see I can hear it a little bit, and as I walk away from the rabbit, the volume goes down. Let's make sure we can see that graph well over here. Come back. So I'm way over about 40 meters away, and as I run towards him, you'll hear it get louder. Press escape and stop. So you can play with the numbers to see how far away you want to be when you can still hear it. You can also change the volume roll-off. Let's say from raw logarithmic, I'd rather just go linear, so it doesn't quickly raise in volume in the last moment, but it gradually raises in volume the whole time. Let's try this. First I'll run away. You can see it's still pretty loud way over here. This is a linear model for the audio. So now as I start walking towards him, you'll hear the audio increase in a linear way. Okay, I'm going to press escape and stop. Now I think that the default of logarithmic roll-off is typically the more normal for 3D audio, because that's more close to how audio works in the real world. Of course, your player can and should be able to adjust the volume. However, it will be your job as the developer to make sure the balance between the different sounds is correct. So for instance, when I run this right now, listen and decide if the ambiance noise should be louder in comparison to the music or vice versa. Now I actually think the balance is okay, but let's say that in comparison to the ambiance noise, you would like the volume for the music to be louder. And this has nothing to do with how close you are to the rabbit, but just in general. Well, you can come up to the volume and change this. We're already at the max loudness, so instead of bringing the volume of this audio up, we may need to go over to the nature and bring the volume of this one down some. And let's run it. And so now the balance between those is different. So that is how you add audio and how you create 3D sound settings.